Introducing the final round of the U13 division of the International Club Debate League Nationals Tournament. We have the pro team from Potomac LP. The first speaker, Elena Liu. And second speaker, Drew Pye. Representing the negative side of the resolution, we have Bergen County KK, the first speaker, Akil Kasubai. And second speaker, Matthew Koretsky. We also have an established, esteemed group of judges in front of us today. We have Mr. Charles McCarthy. Also Judge Alex Holguin. As well as Judge Angela Goff. All right, we are so proud of both teams for making it this far in the tournament. This is definitely not a small feat. Regardless of how this round turns out, everyone here is proud of all of you. Try your best and have a great debate.
All right. So I assume everyone is prepared? Yeah.
4 minutes.
All right. All right. Okay. Partner ready?
Yeah.
Opponents ready?
Yes.
And judges ready? All right.
Everyone's going to have to really speak up because there's no microphones. This is going to help everyone practice projecting their voice.
All right. So my time begins now. According to The Economist, there is abundant evidence that a 10% increase in the minimum wage leads to a 1 to 3% decrease in the employment of low-skilled workers in the short run and an even larger decrease in the long run and with rising unemployment. So hello judges, my name is Elena from the Potomac Debate Academy, and today we will affirm resolved the minimum wage should be abolished. Abolishing the minimum wage will save small businesses, and with more businesses, innovation goes up. The minimum wage currently is increasing the unemployment rate because more employees are being fired since their job owners can't pay them enough, leading us to our first point, unemployment and poverty. A study from the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland found that although low-income workers see wage increases when the minimum wage is raised, their hours in employment decline, and the combined effect of these changes is a decline in earned income. Minimum wages increase the proportion of families that are poor or near poor, as well as the number of people unemployed. As explained by George Raceman, the higher wages are, the higher cost of production are. The higher cost of production are, the higher prices are. And the higher prices are, the smaller quantities of goods and services demanded and the number of workers employed in producing them. Because the minimum wage is in place, many employees are getting fired or laid off because the people owning the business cannot pay the workers with the amount of money they've earned. This has many impacts since more people will be living in poverty and they won't have enough money to survive and get even the most basics of necessities. Not only would the minimum wage make average people lose their jobs, but the people with the lowest skill levels cannot justify higher wages with a disadvantage. The minimum wage is only making unemployment worse, and raising it will not decrease the amount of poverty. Additionally, according to CBO, raising the minimum wage would lead to the loss of 500,000 jobs, and that is not what America wants as its ideal economy. Imagine applying for a job, but then getting fired because your boss cannot pay enough for you. This is a human rights violation because all your hopes of getting jobs and succeeding are just going to get washed away by the minimum wage, and more people are falling into the pit of unemployment and turnover. So our second point is inflation curve. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, data shows that in 1968, the federal minimum wage was equivalent to $10.90, while nearly $4 higher than today's rate. The rate of minimum wage increase is below the increase of inflation. This has many terminal impacts. If this trend continues, the livability of the minimum wage will decrease and more people will not be able to survive. Also, judges, think about this. If you give a man a fish, then he will be fed for one day. However, if you teach a man how to fish, then he will have fish forever. And this connects to the resolution, because if you give a man a higher wage, then sure, he'll be able to live for a day. However, if you teach a man, if you give a man education, then they will be able to survive, because then they can apply for more jobs. And this is connected into our third point, which is mobility and first-time jobs. Increasing the minimum wage reduces the likelihood of upward mobility. Don Bordeaux explains that the minimum wage cuts off the first rung of the employment ladder, and it's that first lowest paying rung that provides the skills and experience workers need to reach the next rung and continue climbing their way up the economic ladder. Minimum wage laws can lead to labor market rigidities that make it more difficult for people to move up the economic ladder. These rigidities can decrease relative mobility and can decrease absolute upward mobility as well. Because of the minimum wage, there is a lack in the development of the economy and the reducing of upward mobility. So for the aforementioned reasons, Judge, I strongly urge for a pro ballot. Thank you.
You were talking about unemployment, but if I am, if with the minimum wage, I have, let's say, 10 workers, and these 10 workers are sufficient to meet, they're sufficient to my company, and they generate enough resources for me to run. Sorry, I'm asking questions here. But why would abolishing the minimum wage make me want more workers?
Okay, so first of all, the problem is that since you have these workers, with the minimum wage, you have to pay them $7.25, let's say. And a lot of employers can't pay their employees enough to that amount of money, so then they just have no choice other than to fire or lay them off. And that increases turnover, and with more turnover rates, then people are just finding more jobs. And finding new jobs requires people to be trained, right? And so if you're trained, you have to spend more money. So it's just bad for the economy.
So, wait. You're saying that are you saying that with abolishing the minimum wage, there will be more jobs? Is that what you're saying?
We're saying that with the minimum wage right now, there's just only going to be less jobs. But if we abolish the minimum wage, then there will be more jobs. Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying that there will be more jobs. But again, can you answer my question that if I have a business with, let's say, 10 employees, and that's sufficient, why would abolishing the minimum wage
but that's just
make me
one
want
scenario.
more?
How do you know if
employees?
it's sufficient enough?
Because without sufficient workers, your company won't be running. So if my company is up and running, what would make me want more workers by abolishing
how
the
is
minimum
10
wage?
workers sufficient enough for okay.
This is an example. Thank you.
Judges ready? Opponents ready?
Yes.
Opponent ready? Yes. So I may begin. Time starts now. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 12 million families only have one parent. Dana Como raised 3 children on a minimum wage job. Thanks to the minimum wage, she is able to keep her family happy and healthy. On $7.25 an hour, what would happen if she was paid less? Her family couldn't survive. Hello, my name is Akil Kasbai, and me and my teammate negate the resolution that the U.S. should abolish the minimum wage. We observe that while the resolution specifically references the abolition of minimum wage, empirical questions about the effect of wage laws on the American economy must revolve around comparative increases or decreases on the minimum wage. These are only empirics that exist, and thus should be prioritized in this round. Now let me first name all my contentions. Minimum wage laws prevent wage depression, reduce poverty, and increase consumer spending. Contention 1. Minimum wage laws prevent backward slides in wages. Minimum wage laws benefit the economy by providing a structural defense against downward pressure on income for low-skilled workers. In an industrial economy like the United States, economists consider 5% unemployment as full employment because of structural friction within the job market. In other words, there is always a greater supply of workers than demand. In the absence of a minimum wage, workers will increasingly contend for a limited number of jobs, resulting in workers lowering their own salaries in order to stay competitive. In fact, Elise Gold of the Economic Policy Institute cites the fact that in 2012 there are on average 3.4 workers competing for each job available, illustrating the competition that already exists for jobs. Contention 2. Minimum wage laws reduce poverty. David Cooper of the Economic Policy Institute explains that more than half of those making minimum wage have a family income less than $40,000 a year, and that they are contrary to the popular belief. More workers 55 and older working minimum wage than they are teenagers. Thus, minimum wage workers' incomes aren't supplementing already high earnings. They are instead being put towards necessities. Additionally, many people who benefit from minimum wage laws are supporting a family. Doug Hall and David Cooper of the Economic Policy Institute find that 7 million low-income parents and, in extension, 21 million American children would see a rise in income through a small increase in minimum wage, showing their economic well-being is tied to minimum wage laws. Contention 3. Minimum wages increase consumer spending. Wages and earnings protected by minimum wage laws increase the strength of the U.S. economy through consumer spending, the amount of money put into the economy through individuals. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that consumer spending accounts for more than 60% of the U.S. economy, being termed by the organization as an engine for U.S. job growth. Minimum wage boosts this spending through increased earnings and thus consumption by low-wage workers. In fact, Sarah Anderson of the Institute of Policy Studies explains that because low-wage workers save very little of what they make, instead of choosing to spend it on necessities, it creates a type of economic multiplier effect. For every extra dollar low-wage workers make, $1.21 is added to the economy, more than 3 times the multiplier from high-income Americans. Because the minimum wage prevents salary depression, reduces poverty, and creates jobs, we urge you, Judge, to vote in neg ballot. Thank you, and I now stand down for questioning.
Okay. Alright, so is everybody ready? Alright, time starts now. Alright, so do you agree with me that with the minimum wage in place, some employers won't be able to pay their employees like enough money so that the employees are just going to get fired?
Yes, like you said, some employers.
Yeah, but like, as we said, 99% of the economy is made up of small businesses, and these small businesses, employers can't pay their employees enough. So if the employees aren't getting paid enough, then they're only going to get fired or laid off, right?
Well, from my evidence, that a whopping 82% of business failure comes from cash flow problems. Therefore, small businesses are not really correlating to the
competition is like, are you saying that competition is like one of the main?
No, cash flow problems.
Oh, cash. Okay. And also, you say that it increases consumer spending, but what we're trying to say is we're not saying to get rid of the minimum wage. We want to get rid of the minimum wage, but we're still going to pay these employees so they have disposable income for consumer spending.
Well, how do you know the employers will not exploit the employees by pretty much putting them close to slavery?
The employers can't exploit the employees because in order to have an employee to go to a job, the employers have to appeal to their employees.
Well,
otherwise, you're not going to you're not going to go apply for a job if you know that you're going to get paid like $1 or $2 an hour.
Do you have any evidence of this happening?
But it's pure logic because you can't it's not logical to just go to a job if you're going to get paid $1 an hour. Right?
Well, if the economy comes in such a state where each employer is going to pay their employee that amount of money.
How can you be sure that the employers are just going to not pay their employees at all or pay them like
I'm not saying they're not going to pay them at all. I'm saying that if every employer agrees to match their benefits by paying their employees less, then they will do that because it will help them.
Okay, so starting with their first point for my reputations, their first point said, what they first said was that small businesses can be saved by abolishing the minimum wage. However, I disagree with this because labor is not a big factor of failure, and they're claiming that small businesses are going to be saved because they can now afford labor. However, a whopping 82% of business failure comes from cash flow problems, according to a U.S. bank study. Also, 2/3 of all minimum wage employees are currently employed by large corporations, meaning that small businesses actually have a bigger chance of employing workers for more than the minimum wage, proving that this argument is invalid. Now, moving on to their second argument, they state that they talked about unemployment and how that would lead to poverty. However, I stated this in the cross-examination that if I have a business with 10 employees and the minimum wage is abolished, why would I need more employees? They might say that I can afford employees for cheaper, but those original employees, think about it. If I lower their prices to a ridiculously low amount just to get more employees, they might quit the job, leading to more job loss for my company. Proving this point is also unimportant. Now, they also talked about inflation, but Newmark and Washer of the National Institute for I'll tell you the source for that after. But Newmark and Washer explained that because a small amount of production costs go to minimum wage workers, the minimum wage has little effect on inflation of prices and goods. Also, the Institute for Study of Labor shows that a 10% increase in minimum wage increases prices by a mere 0.4%, showing that this argument is not important enough to be in this debate. Finally, they were talking about a rung of the ladder argument. However, sub-minimum wages exist, proving this argument invalid. Sub-minimum wages apply for people that are under 20 years of age for 90 days, which allow them to get the experience they need to get more jobs and be able to start working for the minimum wage. So, as you can see, Judge, I have clearly refuted each and every one of my opponent's arguments, and now I will restate my team's arguments and why they are stronger. So my team talked about why we prevent backward slides in wages, and we protect employees everywhere that have jobs, and we protect them from their wages sliding back and them not being able to afford basic goods for their family. Now, we talked about the reduction in poverty, which as my partner stated, the source proves that we could pull up to 6 million people out of poverty. Finally, we talked about how the minimum wage increases consumer spending, which benefits the economy, and therefore our points clearly outweigh our opponent's points. Thank you for listening, judges, and I urge a neck bell.
Cross.
Yeah, I stand up for cross.
Okay, so time will start in. Wait, is everyone ready first of all?
Yeah.
Okay, so 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, so can you explain what cash flow is essentially?
So, where did we state this?
You said that most of small business failure is from cash flow.
So cash flow is, so let's say I have a business and the amount of money coming in, I have to manage how much money I spend coming in and manage how much I keep for employees. So it's basically a management of money coming in from what I sell, essentially.
So basically budgeting?
Yeah, basically.
Okay, so moving on. So you also talked about how basically the example of a business that you had with 10 people and how why would you need any more at all if they're sustaining? Well, okay, so suppose they are sustaining your government and you're making, not your government, your business, sorry, and you're making a net profit, then the company would grow and you would require more employees, correct?
Yes, but we were talking about...
And that would be harder under minimum wage because the employees individually cost more.
But in order to, so first of all, we're talking about when we abolish the minimum wage. And when we abolish the minimum wage, I'm asking why we would need more employees. And we can also expand without abolishing the minimum wage, as my partner has stated in the
speech. So
why
would you need more employees when there are millions of people in America who are unemployed, right?
I am not saying I do need more employees. I'm asking you why we need more employees if the minimum wage is abolished.
Okay, look, what I'm saying is that under your world, you're actually losing employees. So if we can prove status quo, if we can prove that we are at least not affecting employees and you guys are losing, then we're still winning on this point.
Wait, sorry, can you restate that?
So basically we're saying that you're losing employees in your world. We don't have to prove that we're gaining employees if you're losing in yours. We just have to prove that we have less of a weight.
We never said we're losing employees. I'm
But
asking
it
why
costs
we would
more
need
to
more.
hire, correct? So as businesses grow, they can naturally just afford less.
I'm saying.
Oh, and also, can you move on? Oh, too late. Never mind. 15 seconds of prep, please.
You're cross-examining on this.
Okay, I'm ready. Can I just stand at the mic, or can I just stand in the mic?
You want to stand in the middle?
Sure. Okay, so brief off-time roadmap. I'll be going over framework and then going through their constructive and then maybe addressing crossfire and rebuttal if I have time. So my time will start. Wait, is everyone ready? Yeah, so my time will start in 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, so I'd like to start off my rebuttal speech by just having some empathetic appeal. So there's a woman, her name is Nikki Malone, and essentially she is living on a minimum wage. She's a minimum wage worker who works at McDonald's, barely makes the minimum wage, and she has to choose every day between diapers for her single child. She's a single mother with a child, between diapers and food. Every day she has to make that choice. That's what minimum wage does. Minimum wage has absolutely no livability, and for people like her, there's absolutely no other option. So what do we need? Well, increasing the minimum wage has not proved effective. So what do we need? We need something new. We need change. We need to abolish the minimum wage. So moving on. So basically, let's look at their backward wages and slides and worker abuse. Okay, so they're portraying this highly hypothetical image that basically, oh, you're a blue collar worker, we're gonna pay you nothing. Well, let's take a look at this. Okay, let's first look at minimum wage. So already employers use minimum wage as an excuse to pay their employees close to nothing because, like I said, minimum wage has no livability. And on our side, even then, it's set by the market. Like, you can't pay a janitor nothing. He'll just quit the job. If you require the services of someone, then why would you pay them nothing? Because you need their services, so you need to give them a respectable pay. Otherwise, they won't even work for you. So we're not giving them nothing. We're giving them a market price, which is higher than the minimum wage, because the minimum wage is just an excuse. Moving on, you also talked about greater supply of workers and things like that. So basically at this point, I would just like to bring up some employment statistics. So the current state phase-in of higher minimum wage has already lost 2.6 million jobs. And according to the Heritage Foundation, a $15 minimum wage would lead to a further loss of 9 million jobs. Okay, so basically on their point of greater supply of workers, in our world, there's no limit to how many workers you can have because minimum wage basically puts a bar on workers, a price bar, an economic bar. But in our world, businesses have more freedom to do what they want. And then they also talked about it gives enough for necessities and reduces poverty. But let me talk about this, okay? So minimum wage has, like I said, the example, it has no livability, and it has not kept up with inflation. No matter what they say, they said, for example, that minimum wage has little effect on inflation. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that the minimum wage is worth barely anything in inflation. We're not saying that it's causing inflation, but we're saying that it's worth almost nothing now. And then moving on, they also talk about consumers. So this is where I'd like to address this. So consumers, okay, so we increased the minimum wage, more consumer spending. Basically, this is all about disposable income. So if we increase the minimum wage, they get more money so they can spend it, circulate it through the economy, right? Well, this is wrong because essentially this links all back to small businesses because then these small businesses have to raise their prices. And therefore, I strongly urge a pro-ballot. Thank you for your time.
Minutes on the clock. Time starts now. Can you please repeat your evidence of the Heritage Foundation?
The Heritage Foundation states that a $15 minimum wage would lead to a loss of 9 million jobs.
Okay, so from my evidence, the Heritage Foundation goal as a think tank, in its own words, is to formulate and promote conservative public policies based on the principles of free enterprise, limited government, individual freedom and traditional American values and a
Yes,
strong
so it's a voice
defense.
of the
In
people.
other words, they're inherently biased. Why do you think that you could use the word of the Heritage Foundation if I have all of these facts about how the Heritage Foundation is
Okay,
inherently
wait, you just
biased?
said that it's for the freedom of the people, so you're effectively
I
saying
said
it's
other
the
things
voice
too.
of the people.
Well, that's not
Okay,
relevant.
and
Now let me
also,
move to my
we have other statistics. if
other
you want them.
questions. Okay, you could bring them up in prep time and show me them. Thank you. Okay, you stated that minimum wage. We said that minimum wage employees will get nothing. I never said that. I said
Yes,
that
you
minimum.
said-
Can I please finish my question? Because I'm the one asking questions. We never said that. We said that if you have a minimum wage, the employers will exploit their employees and give them slave labor while you said
Okay,
that
so-
they'll get limited nothing. Yeah.
So the definition of slave labor is doing work for nothing. And while it's true they won't get anything, that's an exaggeration, but they will still get exploited by the employers, like you said.
All right, thank you. Now you just showed me that you exaggerated on it.
But
Why
it's
would
still,
the woman?
It's still a real world impact. It's still
Let me move
valid.
on. Why would the woman in the beginning of your speech be better when abolishing the minimum wage actually hurts employees?
Can you tell me why exactly instead of
Like
stating
I
the
said
claim?
in my speech. Like I said, in
She
my
will
speech.
get fired if you raise the minimum wage because she doesn't have the skills to stay in business.
Well, then wouldn't she be adapted and start to learn the skills of how to
Okay,
stay in
why-
business to
okay,
actually
look,
get jobs?
look.
Wouldn't that
This is a
increase?
fallacy. Okay, so look, she has no skills, right? Why would companies hire her and pay her the minimum wage if she is prone to error because she has no skills?
Why wouldn't she just learn by herself? Thank you.
But she has no money.
Alright, partner ready?
Yeah.
Opponents ready? And
Wait, I have to put the phone.
judge ready? Alright, so 1 second. Yeah. My time begins now. Alright, so judge, I will be defending my case now. So, my opponents say that one of the major reasons why there are business problems in small businesses is because of the cash flow. But in our world, we help with this problem, and so they said that under the people would be employed by large corporations, but under the minimum wage, the employers will not be able to pay their employees that $7.25. My opponents bring up that example in the crossfire, which is how if he has a business with 10 employees, but 10 employees isn't enough. And with the businesses growing more, employees will cost more. And as we said in our constructive speech, if when prices rise, then the higher prices are, the smaller the quantities of goods and services demanded and the number of workers employed in producing them, which means that with the minimum wage, there's only going to be more unemployment. Also, my partner brought up this example of this woman named Nicole Malone and how she has to decide between diapers and food with the amount of money she's making from the minimum wage. If we didn't have any minimum wage at all, then employers could be able to hire less skilled workers and pay them a little bit less than the minimum wage, and so that way they can work for how much they deserve and they can learn the skills. As we gave you the analogy in our constructive speech about the fish, if you give a man a fish, then he'll only be fed for a day, but if you teach him the skills, then he'll be able to live forever. Well, live for a longer time. So then if you keep the minimum wage, then the man is only going to be able to live for a day. But if you if you get rid of the minimum wage and you pay him how much he needs to learn the skills, then he'll only be better off in life. So therefore, I strongly urge for a pro ballot. Thank you.
Judges ready? Opponents ready?
Yeah.
Opponent ready?
Yeah.
So I may begin. The opponents keep on being redundant about the fact about Nikki Malone, the person who they're talking about. And they keep on saying that she's unemployed. While I said in my first contention that in an industrialized economy like the United States, economists consider 5% unemployment as full employment because of structural friction within the job market. This is just elaborating on the fact that the people who are unemployed are actually trying to find a job. Like how I said, on average 3.4 workers are competing for each job available, showing that maybe Nikki Haley might not have a job, but she's still trying to get a job because of the full employment of the economists that I kept on saying about. The opponents attacked her cases and said that why would they have slave labor, like I tried to say in the beginning. I never said why would they said that I had zero money, but they would actually get slave labor because the workers would exploit them. They would take control of their weaknesses because there's no minimum wage, and they'll pay them as much as they want. We don't want this for our economy, and we don't want this for the people and the citizens of the United States. They kept on elaborating on the fact that we were actually making poverty more real. But like I said in my contention, that if we uprate the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour, we would raise 6.8 million people, citizens out of poverty. Well, 6.8 million is an exponentially greater amount than the amount of people who are in the spot of Nikki Malone. And now, to sum this up, let me go over my contentions and how they stand strong in this debate. The minimum wage prevents salary depression, reduces poverty, and creates jobs. We have sufficient evidence for all of these contentions, and we still stand strong throughout the debate. Thank you, and I hope you wish for a neg ballot.
Okay,
May we run the rest of our prep, please? All right. Wait.
is everyone ready? I'm done with my print type. Oh. Need any more prep.
All right, then go.
Okay, so now is everybody ready? Okay, so I'll be doing the weighing and summarizing of this debate. So my time starts in 3, 2, 1, go. Hello, judges, and I would like to do the final focus for this debate. So right now, let's go through the main points, some of the points they dropped, and then go back and look at some human appeal. So let's start with small businesses. Okay, so for small businesses, basically, they agreed practically with our logical fallacy that with higher prices on workers, that you could just get less of them. And this is a bad thing for both unemployment and for small businesses. It causes small businesses to die, the economy to be affected, and in general, make America a worse place. Moving on to employment, this was one of the primary clashes in our debate, and so all I can say for employment is the fact that in their world, just take a look at their world, okay? First-time workers can't get employed. Many racial minorities can't get employed because of minimum wage as an excuse. And also, immigrants and nearly everybody cannot get employed, and many people are getting fired if you even raise the minimum wage. So really, I don't see anything other than that. Moving on to employees and employers. So at this point, it might look like we're advocating for richer employers and they're advocating for richer employees, but this is not the case. You must see that we benefit both employees and employers, because when we in their world, just take a look at the employees, correct? The employees are being laid off and their work hours are being reduced, which means that they're actually not benefiting at all from the higher wage, like my partner said. And then moving on to market pricing, we're not paying them nothing. We're not paying them close to nothing in our world. We're paying them by the market, by our capitalistic market. And so now I would like to go back to the fish analogy. If you give a man a fish, he's fed for a day. If you teach him how to fish, he is fed for life. And so first-time jobs is a completely drop point, and it's the basis, it's the education of how people get good jobs. And then I would like to go back to Nicole Malone. Do you really want people? It's just a choice between between people like Nicole Malone and a good world for everybody working the minimum wage, no matter how rich or poor, no matter who they are. So I strongly urge a pro ballot. Thank you for your time.
Can we take the rest of our time?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, just before time starts, I want to tell you what this speech is going to be about. So I'm going to be reviewing everything that went through this debate, including our points, our refutations of their points, and I will weigh this debate and conclude the winner. So time starts now. So I think this entire debate boils down to two big questions: which side benefits? Which side is more important with morality, and which side benefits the economy more? Clearly, judges, as you can see, our side is more moral because we prevent backward slides in workers' wages. As the other team stated, Nikki Malone, she's working for the minimum wage. If the minimum wage is abolished, we're protecting her currently with the minimum wage. We're protecting her from her wages go down. If the minimum wage is abolished, she will have less to pay and feed her family with. And second of all, we talked about bringing people out of poverty, which is a very moral argument and we talked about bringing up to 6 million people out of poverty, which is much more impact than any of their arguments could do. Finally, we have also showed the most benefit to the economy, talking about the increase in consumer spending and how this will benefit our economy and altogether benefit all the people in the United States. So now we'll go on to our refutations of their arguments. So for their small business argument, we talked about how the small businesses are the most willing to pay above the minimum wage. So this argument is completely invalid. The second argument about unemployment, we asked about 10 employees and why we would want more, but they just said that 10 employees is not enough. But this is just a statement. This is a hypothetical statement. If this would happen, this is an example. You can't just say that that's not enough workers. Also, for their inflation argument, we provided evidence that still stands tall and shows why this is insignificant. And for the wrong of the latter argument, we proved that there are sub-minimum wages, which also makes this argument invalid. Finally, on our side, as you can see, we benefit morality more. We protect from backward slides in wages, which protects the people more than unemployment, which actually doesn't work, and they were not able to defend their argument against this. As you can see, Judge, our side is more moral and benefits the economy more, so therefore we win. I highly urge a neg ballot. Thank you.
Round of applause. Once again, to our debaters, please stand up. This was a very really competed debate. It was a very close debate. I am pleased to announce that on a 2-1 decision, the United States National Debate Champions come from the affirmative, Potomac. Can we all take a moment to honor our finalists in this debate tournament who did an amazing job, and you must be really proud. Can we recognize Bergen County? That was a great speech. Good job, both of you. All right, here you go. Let's get our pictures done. The national champions from Potomac, the negative. Come on up. We have Elena Liu and Drew Pye, our national champions.